Kids. So today we will first start with the lesson, the fundamental unit of life. In this lesson we will first discuss what is cell, then we will see what are the different discoveries related to cell, then we will see unicellular and multicellular organisms, and then we will see what are the living organisms made up of, and finally we will see what is the structural organization of any cell. So let us start our discussion, that is what is cell. Any structure of plant and animal, when you see under a microscope, you will see that it is composed of many small units which are known as cells. So cells are very small and they cannot be seen with our naked eyes. In order to observe a cell, we need a microscope. So we can say that cell is the smallest structural and functional unit of life. There are basically two types of cells, prokaryotic cell and eukaryotic cell. Prokaryotic cells are the primitive type of cells which does not have a true nucleus or which lack a true nucleus. For example, bacterial cell. And the other type of cell, that is eukaryotic cells, are the evolved type of cells which are having a true nucleus. For example, plant cell and animal cell. Next, coming to the discoveries, we have first, how is the cell discovered? So cell was first discovered by the scientist Robert Hooke in the year 1665. Robert Hooke was the first scientist who observed a slice of cork under a microscope. Cork is nothing but it is a substance coming out from the bark of a tree. When Robert Hooke has observed the slice of cork under the microscope, he has seen various small tiny compartments which altogether resembles a honeycomb-like structure. Then he named those little compartments as cell. So cell is a Latin word which means a little room. In this presentation you can see the diagram of a cork which is being observed under a microscope. You can see that similar various small similar compartments are being seen on the slide. Following Robert Hooke, there was another scientist whose name was Anton van Leeuwenhoek, who in the year 1671 discovered 3 living cells found in the pond water, which is being identified as bacteria. Following him, nucleus was discovered by Robert Brown in the year 1831. Following whom, protoplasm was discovered by Perkenzie in the year 1839. Then we come to the cell theory. There were two scientists, namely Sladen and Swan, who has worked and given the cell theory. Sladen was a botanist who was working on the plant cell, and he found that all the plant cells are composed of various types of cells which together grouped into tissues. While the Swan has worked on animal cells since he was a zoologist, and he found that all the animal cells have a outermost covering which is known as cell membrane. In addition to this cell membrane, plant cells also have a cell wall. So in the year 1838 Sladen and in the year 1839 Swan has proposed cell theory, which says that all the plants and animals are composed of cells and product of cells, and cell is the basic unit of life. After them, again in the year 1855, another scientist came whose name was Rudolf Virchow, who has modified the cell theory by saying that all cells arises from the pre-existing cells. So the cell theory consists of 3 postulates. All the plants and animals are composed of cells. Cell is the basic unit of life, and all cells arises from the pre-existing cell. Now we will see what are the living organisms made up of. We all know that all the living organisms are made up of small units which is known as cells. Cells can be easily seen if we will observe an onion peel under a microscope. If we talk about the shape and size of the cell, it varies according to its function. Cells may be oval in shape, it may be elliptical in shape, it may be polygonal in shape, it may be elongated, it may be smaller in size, or it may be larger in size. If we talk about the smallest cell, it is PPLO, that is pleuropneumonia-like organism. It is also called mycoplasma. Mycoplasma are a group of bacteria which is having only cell membrane and they lack cell wall. Their length is about 0.3 micron. The largest cell is ostrich egg, which is about 15 centimeter in diameter. The smallest cell in our body is red blood cell, which is also known as RBC, and the largest cell in our body is nerve cell, which is also known as neuron. So in the figure you can see a mycoplasma colony, that is the smallest cell, largest cell ostrich egg, smallest cell in our body, that is biconcave RBCs, and the largest cell is the elongated neuron. Then we will discuss unicellular and multicellular organisms. If you see the number of cells present in the body, we can classify organisms on the two categories: unicellular organism and multicellular organisms. Uni means one, cellular means cell. So if the organism's body is made up of only one cell, then it is said to be unicellular organism. For example, amoeba, euglena, bacteria, paramecium, and chlamydomonas. All these cells have single cell which is capable of performing all the essential functions and physiological activities required for surviving. On the other hand, multi means many, cellular means cells. So if the organism's body is made up of more than one cell or many cells, then such organisms are said to be multicellular organisms. For example, fungi, plants, and animals. You can see division of labor in multicellular organisms. For example, suppose in our body, heart pumps blood, stomach helps in the digestion of food. So in higher organisms, we have division of labor. Not only that, multicellular organisms have also arisen from a single cell. We can say that because when a cell divides, it gives rise to two or more than two cells. That means all these multicellular organisms have arisen from a single cell. In this slide, you can see the diagram of a amoeba, paramecium, and a bacterial cyst, which includes and comes under the unicellular organisms. And in the next slide, you can see the diagrams of multicellular organisms such as fungi, plants, and different kinds of animals. The last topic of our today's discussion is the structural organization of a cell. Every cell is capable of performing certain functions, which is the basic of all the living organisms. Now, as we all have seen that in multicellular organisms, division of labor is there which performs different functions. Just like that, in cell also specialized structures are present which is helping the cell to perform its functions, and those specialized structures are known as cell organelles. Cell organelles, irrespective of their structures or functions and from which in which organism they are present, they are all having the same structures. But if you see a cell under a microscope, you will see that all the cell have a basic structure which is common for all the organisms, whether it is unicellular or it is multicellular. So when we see a cell under a microscope, we will see that all the cells are made up of these three basic components. The first one is cell membrane, which is also known as plasma membrane. Second is nucleus, and the third one is cytoplasm. In plant cells, in addition to this plasma membrane, another outer covering is present which is known as cell wall. So first we will start with plasma membrane. So the other name of cell membrane is plasma membrane. Plasma membrane was discovered by C. Nageli and C. Kramer in the year 1855. As I have already told you, it is the outermost covering of the cell except plant cell, because plant cells are having cell wall which separates the contents of the cell from its external environment. Okay, so it allows the entry and exit of certain molecules such as ions and molecules in and out of the cell. So we can say that plasma membrane is selectively permeable membrane, as it allows only certain molecules to pass through it. In the figure, there is a diagram of plasma membrane. You can see that white heads and black color tails, this represents a lipid molecule. So we can say there are two layers of lipid molecules. So we can say that a plasma membrane has a bilayer lipid molecules on which the proteins are being embedded. Those blue colors structures are the proteins. So it is made up of lipids and proteins. It is a very thin, elastic and living membrane. Okay, it also encloses nucleus and cytoplasm, and it also helps in the production of the cellular components. As I have told you that a cell is made up of cell organelles, so since a plasma membrane is the outer covering of the cell, so it protects the cellular components or cell organelles from the external environment. Okay, so it separates and helps in protection. Since we have seen that plasma membrane helps in the movement of the molecules, so now we will see how does the movement of substance takes place into the cell and outcoming, and how it moves out of the cell. So there are two basic processes which helps in the movement of the substances. Those two basic processes are known as diffusion and osmosis. Diffusion is nothing but it is the spontaneous movement of substance from a region of its higher concentration to a region of its lower concentration. Okay. Generally, diffusion occurs in the case of gaseous molecules. So whenever carbon dioxide and oxygen has to enter into the cell, it enters into the cell or it leaves the cell by the process of diffusion. There are other importance of diffusion, such as apart from gaseous exchange, it also helps in the transport of food through phloem. Not only that, it also helps in the loss of water by transpiration. and this transpiration process is based on the principle of diffusion. Then movement of ions and solutes from one cell to another cell takes place through the diffusion. The second most important process by which the movement of molecules takes place is the osmosis. Osmosis is nothing but it is the movement of water molecules through a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration through a semi-permeable membrane. So we can say that osmosis is a special case of diffusion, because we have seen that in diffusion we don't need any kind of semi-permeable membrane, but on the other hand, when we talk about osmosis, we need a semi-permeable membrane so that the molecules can pass from higher concentration to lower concentration. Okay, so in this diagram you can see that we have taken concentrated sugar solution and dilute sugar solution, which is being separated by a semi-permeable membrane. So as we all know that the movement of water molecules will take place from higher concentration to lower concentration. So the blue color molecules on the right hand side of the beaker will move from there to the left hand side of the beaker, which is having less concentration of water. This represents the process of osmosis occurring in the solution. Now, apart from this, there are other significance of osmosis, such as absorption of water by roots and root hairs. We all know that the plants absorb water and minerals from the soil with the help of root hairs. So which process is helping them to do so? That is osmosis. Water moves from one cell to another cell because of osmosis, because it has to pass this plasma membrane. Then it also controls the amount of water within the cell. That means it maintains the turgidity of the cell. And finally, it also controls various physiological activities, that is opening and closing of stomata, splitting of roots, and the seed dispersal.